When a child's mother, the one person she trusts, forces her into marriage, who does she turn to for help? How does she escape?
Baye waphinde wandijikisa mos wathi mandihambe ndiyotshata futhi nyandike baphinde bandithatha nami ndikhala ndingafuni.
As I stand here, over 90,000 young girls, many as young as 14, are living as child brides across South Africa. Girls who had their whole lives ahead of them. We investigate the child bride crisis, specifically here in the Eastern Cape.
𝗀𝗄𝗧𝗵𝗶 is a provincial legal officer for the Commission for Gender Equality in the Eastern Cape. She works closely with the community and the courts with regards to forced child marriages, which are often mistakenly referred to as 𝗀𝗂𝗏𝗏.
𝗀𝗂𝗏𝗏 was a customary practice wherein it was used as a means to force lobola negotiations. So it was an abduction of a young girl by a person of the same age, which would then force the families to negotiate marriage. There was consent on both parties. There was no forced sexual intercourse at any stage. Currently, we are seeing a polluted version of 𝗀𝗂𝗏𝗏. The Commission's view is that 𝗀𝗂𝗏𝗏 in its polluted sense is a criminal act because there is no consent of the young child, and also what age can you give that consent. It's a guise for human trafficking and forced marriage.
Zandi, which is not her real name to protect her identity, was allegedly forced into marriage by her mother when she was 14. She was sold to a man 12 years her senior and taken to his house under the guise of helping her grandmother collect money and then locked in a tiny room.
Kungene lo mntu athi ucela ungitshata ndithi hayi andifuna utshata ndibe ndikhala ke kwafika umama waphayana ke esithi uyondithengela ezinye izinto zoba ndinxibe ndibe ngumfazi waphaya kuzongena lo mntu kuthiwa ndizotshatela kuye afika athi ndizolala ndingafuni ucopha esitulweni ndandiyicinga ukuthi bangandidlwengula bangandenza anything.
Zandi sat on the same chair for 3 days, refusing to eat or sleep. 𝗃𝗃 is the director of 𝗀𝗏𝗏, a community development project focusing specifically on the rural Eastern Cape. Together with the Hawks, he was directly involved in rescuing Zandi after receiving a tip-off from the local community that a young girl was being held against her will.
By the time we arrived in the area, the girl managed already to escape. And apparently she escaped going home, crossing the river. But on arrival at home, she was sent back by her biological mother. And then she escaped again. So we went straight to the place where the mother resides. And that's how we got hold of the girl.
Captain Jack is the Hawks investigating officer for human trafficking in the Eastern Cape. She worked closely with Majola on Zandi's case.
I drove with Mr. Majola to that homestead and we rescued the child. We take the child and put her in a safe place with social development. Social development was in place. It's very hard to find these cases because the perpetrators are the parents. If the child didn't have a chance to escape, we will not know that the child have gone through 𝗀𝗂𝗏𝗏.
Pamela was 16 when she was abducted for a 33-year-old man and forced to live as his wife.
Nyani kancinci nje sihamba bese kufika abantu bendithi nqaqnqa kwingalo kanje omnye abambe ngapha omnye abambe ngapha ndibese ndikhala ke ngoku hayi ke ndihambe ndikhala endleleni ndikhwaza andiyazi noba ndiyabona konba inoba ndiyenda ndiyathwalwa siyofika ke kulomzi ndendela kuwo ndifike ndihlale ndilinde kuba inoba ngubani lo mntu ndendela kuye apho inoba nje mhlambi after 30 minutes kufike la mama ebeyondithatha ukhalelane ezinto uzibona apha izaba zezakho kwathini uzaba nemali uzawuyeka usokola ndizame nokuphuma efestileni ndabhaqwa ke ndisazama uphuma efestileni ndaphela ndabuyisa phansi ndahlala wabuya ke lo bhuti wazothi uzaba inkosikazi yam so ndicela uzolala ebhedini ndithi naye andifuna ulala hayi ndihlale ke ndiqhubeke kodwa ke ngoba ndisakwazi ukhala sekusihla nje inyembe zindifixiza.
For almost 2 years, Pamela's family didn't know where she was until her abductor's family returned to pay lobola.
Lobola, or the payment of money for a bride, is seen as a motivating factor behind forced child marriages in the Eastern Cape and across South Africa.
Poverty is always cited as one of the contributing factors. In another area of 𝗶𝗂, they were talking about 7 cows and 6,000 rand. But you look at 7 cows and 6,000 rand, and you compare that to the value of your child.
There is a belief that there is a close link between poverty and 𝗀𝗏𝗴𝗶𝗴𝗆, specifically where it is promised that your daughter will have a better life.
Currently, there is no specific law prohibiting 𝗀𝗏𝗴𝗶 or forced child marriages, so the NPA has to use various existing laws to prosecute these cases.
The main one for us is the Trafficking in Persons Act. There is a specific section which prohibits forced marriage and the trafficking of children for sexual purposes.
Zandi's mom and everyone who was involved in her being forced into marriage have been charged with contravening the Trafficking Persons Act. The trial is scheduled for June.
Hayi andazi nami ukuthi mama kwakuthini ukuthi angitshadise. Mhlawumbe wayengenintoni andiyazi. Ndiyamkhumbula ngoba ngumama wami, ndamxolela ngoba ngumama wami walicela uxolo. Ndalivuma ngoba ngumama.
Pamela never managed to escape and she was never rescued. After being married for 2 years, she had her first child and her nightmare continued for 13 more years.
Yo, bekukubi kubuhlungu. Cha benibamba ngikhola nje nditsala ndibethi ke emadongeni. Ukundibetha kwakhe ke kusebusuku. Uba ufuna ulala nami uzawundicinizela kwezindawo. Uzawuba phezulu kwami ndilele kanje. Ndiyakhala athi ndizakwenza noba ufune. Ndibona ngathi ubomi bami mina mwabenza nje anzima.
One night, enough was enough, and Pamela packed everything she had and escaped with her 3 children. That was 2 years ago. Today, she is free and putting her life back together. She travels amongst the neighboring villages, telling other women her story and speaking out against forced child marriages.
When we talk about the communities where this is happening, do they see it as this? Do they see it as the natural and traditional form of 𝗀𝗏𝗴𝗶𝗴𝗆, or are they seeing it as what it is?
Through our community engagements, there have been differing views. In some instances, there is a firm resolve that 𝗀𝗏𝗴𝗶𝗴𝗆 is a customary practice and should be practiced, whilst in other communities, there's a strong view that it will not be tolerated, and in all forms, it would be reported to 𝗲𝗵𝗔 and the traditional leader.
In the rural areas of the Eastern Cape, the kids are not safe. Within our environment, SAPS, we don't have much manpower, so we cannot be in house by house to make sure the kids have not gone 𝗀𝗏𝗴𝗆, but we are trying our level best to make sure whenever case comes to our attention, we attend to it quickly so that the child can be rescued immediately.
Even though there are still a large number of children being forced into marriage across South Africa, there is potential for a new law reform that will make saving these children and getting the perpetrators prosecuted a lot easier.
The South African Law Reform Commission undertook a project where they investigated and interrogated whether there's a need for a specific statute prohibiting 𝗀𝗏𝗴𝗆 and other forms of forced child marriage. They released a discussion paper where they included a draft bill. Currently, the report is before the Minister of Justice. We do not have the time frames as to when he would be able to consider the report. It was provided to him mid-year last year. I do believe that the successful prosecution of persons involved will send a strong message to communities to say this will not be tolerated, that there are severe consequences for this type of activity, because it grossly violates the constitutional rights of young girls.
Regardless of what happens at her mom's trial, Zandi will indefinitely be living with family outside of the Eastern Cape.
Mna xa sendigqibile isikolo ndifuna uba yi-social worker ngoba ndifuna unceda abantu like mna nabanye abantu endibabonayo phaa ekuhlaleni abasokolayo, ndiphinde ndijonga indlela endikhule ngayo. Abanye abantu andifuni bakhule the way endikhule ngakhona.
Share your thoughts with us using hashtag Carte Blanche on Twitter or by commenting on our Facebook page. Coming up after the break, homeless men take on Shakespeare and give it all they've got. And later in the show, a special report on the final installment of the so-called Krugersdorp killers case.
It's been a marathon trial, a punishing parade of gruesome evidence and shocking testimony that's taken its toll on everyone concerned. And it's not over yet.